Hey everybody, welcome. Let me just lower this a little bit. Got a little speaker so that this way you could hear the music a little bit while you're listening. So I wanted to start by saying that today is On the Path, and On the Path is usually about this idea of what the Druids would have believed, what the Druids would have accepted as truth, and that and in all of these on the paths, none of these on the paths are something that hinge on something else, none of them. So that you could watch, say, one and watch another, and none are actually related. Therefore, they're all independent on one another. Tonight, we're going to talk about what I believe is the triad of ethical behavior of the Druids. And I would say that it would have come probably later on in the Iron Age that this would have been accepted as truth, that there was a code, if you will. There was a code of Druidic thought that insisted on this idea that the Druids would follow these 3 points, this triad, and that these 3 points would have been accepted as truth by the Druids. So we're going to go over the 3 points in tonight's talk, and we're also going to investigate and evaluate the authors that would have celebrated these truths. So I'm going to go ahead and put something in the comment section so you can see what we're talking about, and we're going to pin this. There we go. Alright, so that's what we're talking about tonight. It's in the comments. You can see it pinned. This way you can go ahead and make your own comments and invoke some sort of a conversation between yourselves tonight as I speak. So what are these 3 points? What is this triad of ethical behavior? And it all comes down to something that sounds similar to this. Worship God, do no evil, and be manly. Worship God, do no evil, and be manly. So this is supposedly the 3 things that the Druids would have believed as truth. But where do they come from, and why do they exist? And deeper, who wrote them about the Druids? And more importantly, what mindset was that author in when they were writing about them? So we know for a fact that it is almost quite possible, and even the great historians, Aunt Ross, Peter Bursford Ellis, you got Rutherford, you have Steiner, you have all these great people who wrote so many things about the Druids, and even Kendrick would say that yes, these are 3 things that the Druids would have believed to be true. What is very special about the 3 things, this idea of worshiping God, doing no evil, and being manly, is that it could have been taken in so many ways, but if we bring it down to this, there's a reason why. And it's this idea that the main author that had wrote this, thought that worshiping the gods was truly the number one thing to do, because if you did not worship the gods, you would not have any way of connecting to the god or gods of your understanding. The second was that no evil shall be done, no harm shall be done. And that is very relevant to the writer, because the writer believed truly that the Druids would have accepted this as their second, their second doctrine, if you will. And finally, that manly behavior be maintained. And when we talk about manly, we have to really think about the genuine the genuine thought of what manly meant back in this time, because there were roles that the man did, and there were roles that the female did, and that the roles that the male did was something that could have been attained by even today's standards, basically anyone, but that there was sort of an honor with this, sort of a code with this, the idea of being a provider, the person that provided. And so with that, I think it's important that we realize and recognize that these three things were the code for the Druid, were the code for the most holy ancients, the priests of the old religion. So where does it come from? Where does this idea of worship God, do no evil, and be manly, where does it originate from? And I would say that it's clearly something that lays in contradiction to another triad by another writer. The person that wrote, be manly, worship God, do no evil and be manly, the person that wrote that is not the person that wrote a second triad that the Druids would have assumed. In that, it would have been to act bravely in war, okay? Perhaps that would have been the be manly, That souls are immortal, okay? And with that, you have the idea of worshiping the gods, and that there is another life after death, in that do no evil, so that this way you can inherit that life after death, right? So they all sort of said the same thing, just in different ways. And that these three triad, these three codes, if you will, the triad of ethical behavior of the Druids, was written by two different people. The first, which is, to worship the gods, or actually to worship God it was actually, and to do no evil, and to exercise fortitude, or, be manly, was written by a person by the name of Diogenes Laertius. And Diogenes, or Diogenes, would have been a Greek philosopher, and that philosophy that Diogenes had and was teaching would have been cynicism. And cynicism showed people that they did not need anything in this world to survive. They would have been people who looked very cynically upon those things such as lust, those things such as gluttony, those things such as greed, just to name a few. And so those cynics would have definitely taken that very seriously, and therefore that's probably the reason why they didn't believe in having any possessions. Drop everything and come follow me. So that idea of Diogenes Laertius, of worshiping gods, doing no evil, and exercising fortitude or being manly, was really now a way of seeing the cynicism of the disinterest of the Druids with any sort of things in this world, or any need for things in this world beyond that which was of nature. Now, the second thought was from a Roman who happened to be a social scientist whose focus was geography. And in that, we think about this idea of seeing social constructs as they relate to the geography of those people in that land. Pomponius Mela, was that Roman. And he writes, to act bravely in war, that souls are immortal, and there is another life after death. So that those three things, in that case, would have been the idea that would have been particular to the geography of the Druids and their social science, and what they would have understood to be true based on where they were and their experience from where they came. I think that if we take these thoughts and, put them together, you're still going to end up with three. And I think that even Diogenes Laertius went into something even greater than those three. He writes, the three first principles of wisdom of the Druids were obedience to the laws of God, concern for the good of mankind, and bravery in sustaining all the accidents of life. Now, whether or not the word accidents in that case, which I think could have been, because remember, we're talking about Diogenes, who was Greek, right? Who was the cynic. Accidents would have been those things that are of this world. Things we see, things we hear, things we touch, things we can taste. And according to Diogenes, there's this idea that those things were not important, that those things were sort of, not applicable to this world. It wasn't those things that you needed, those accidents. You didn't need those things to inherit immortality. But what you did need to inherit immortality would have been substance, would have been that which is you, that which makes you, and that which becomes you. In that case, we only see three elements of this idea that substance then really becomes that which we are seeking in this world. And since Diogenes was a cynic, he wouldn't have been interested in the accidents of this world. He wouldn't have been interested in what you look like or the color of your skin. or you know, the orientation that you were, or even the gender that you were. He would have been more interested in what was it of you that made you who you were. And it wasn't anything that we could see, anything that we could taste, anything that we could feel, anything we could sense, but that it was something that was invisible in this world, yet known from this world. I think that when we talk about these three, you know, according to Diogenes later comes out and says, you know, the three first principles of wisdom. I think that what we see here, you know, of worshiping God or worshiping the gods, and I think that in I guess in Pomponius Mela, it would have been a singular god, and in Diogenes, Laertius, it would have been many gods. But more importantly, this idea of worshiping something beyond you. That, when added to, you know, doing no evil, and then added to, you know, the idea of being manly or exercising, you know, virtue and what some would call fortitude. I think that these three things are definitely Druidic. I think that these three things are really, I would say, to the point that you probably couldn't get such a more lower common denominator of thought than any. That this and these three things were it for the Druids as far as any sort of real dogma that we can say for sure and have proof of without negation. And also remembering that the Greeks look fondly upon the Druids and the Romans did not at all. And I think that that's, you know, a big difference as well, not only with regard to what these authors would have would have been interested in their daily lives, their appetite, if you will, but also the fact that they came together on this, that this was something that they basically both agreed to, that they said that these three things are those three things that they would believe to be wisdom, which I call, you know, the triad of their ethical behavior. So if we can take these things and use them in our daily lives, I don't foresee a problem with that, because I think that there's something that, you know, all of us can recognize and all of us can, you know, do. It isn't something that they're asking you to jump through hoops of fire for this. This is something that's fairly basic and simple. You know, I don't think that we're people, and I stated this earlier in another video. I stated that I don't think that we're born atheists. I think we are born inquisitive into something more. I think that atheism is something that is nurtured. I also think that the accidents of God, what God looks like, what God feels like, what God tastes like, if you will, the accidents of God, I think those things are nurtured, but God itself, or the gods themselves are something that we are, you know, born inquisitive to, with the fact that they do exist. Who made this rock? How did this rock get here? And if we're using science, then we just continue to go back and question and question and question and question until we reach the point where science cannot answer that question anymore. Until that science says, I don't know. Because science says that a lot. Anyway, so I thought that that'd be a really nice thing to talk about tonight. I hope that you incorporate these into your life as Druids, and remember that you know, Druidism is something that shouldn't be taken lightly or jovially. I think that we should really be very, be very genuine in our reactions to Druidism, and remember that it is a very sacred thing to have as your belief system. I don't believe that everyone is called to be a Druid, just like everyone isn't called to be a doctor, or called to be a lawyer, or called to be a judge, or called to be a teacher. I think that it is a call that's not common, but I think that these calls from the ancient priesthoods and the old religion are becoming more and more common as our world gets more and more chaotic. As you know, we live in this world where no one knows the answer to anything, and basic biology doesn't even exist anymore. So I think that we really should think and focus on that while we're in this world of chaos. I think it's important that we recognize the intricacies of the Druids, and yet even in those intricacies, we find solstice in knowing that they're actually simplicities, and everyone can be part of this. Worshipping the gods, doing no evil, and being manly. With that, have a good night, whatever time of day it is, make it great. And at this point, I will go ahead and give you your Druidic blessing. Here we go. May the gods bless you. May the goddesses keep you. May the Fae shine their light upon you. May our ancestors remain with you forever and ever. Gidalwin. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something, even if it was a bit of Druidism, that with this, you continue to be on the path.